seat.
Thank you very much, David Zinn. Thank Andy Shalal and all the people here for making this celebration of Howard Zinn's life possible. You will hear the vast dimensions of Howard Zinn's activities and the speakers that will be here very shortly. To me, Howard Zinn represented dissent in America across a broader spectrum of issues and activities, from his educational function to his organizing function to his inspirational function. Dissent is the mother of assent. If you look very carefully at what we have achieved in our country that represents civil rights and civil liberties, whether substantive or procedural, they started out as dissent. And now they've come to the status of assent. So the dissenter's role is one that is not simply drawing a line in the sand and saying no, although it includes that. It's much more than that. It's moving toward a higher level of activity that represent the fulfillment of life's possibilities, starting with human rights. I am here to talk about Howard Zinn's afterlife on Earth. Very often, when people who've advanced justice over the years and defined their life as such leave this earth, they provoke sweet memories, recollections, all of which tend to be motivating for a period of time. They establish exemplary behavior, which often replicate themselves among the young. But we need to go further than that. The legacy of Howard Zinn should be institutionalized in the best sense. The great public citizen of post-war Europe, Jean Monnet, once said, "Without people, nothing is possible. Without institutions, nothing is lasting." I think of the NAACP and its founders, the American Civil Liberties Union and its founders, the Sierra Club and its founders, and other institutions that have lifted our country's expectation level into reality. I think we should, starting here, which I believe is the first of Howard's celebrations, which will go to New York and Madison, Wisconsin, and Boston, and possibly Chicago and the West Coast, that we express our general intent in considering the establishment of a Zinn Institute for Peace and Justice that will not be bureaucratic, that will be initiatory, it will be principled, and it will take off from the final recommendation that Howard always ended his speeches on. That means the organization of neighborhoods, the organization of people. That was his bottom line. Once people became aware, once the facts were out, that was his bottom line. And that is the way we should extend his bottom line, and do it by expanding the number of young and not so young people in his path. When Senator Paul Wellstone and his wife Sheila lost their lives in an airplane crash a few years ago, their children did not waste a moment after the grieving period in establishing the Wellstone Center for training young organizers and other civic activities. And so he and Sheila live on through that center. It would have been easy just to have memorials and anecdotes and humor that expresses truth about Senator Wellstone and Sheila. But they went the next step. I recall when John Kenneth Galbraith passed away, there was no effort to extend the kind of progressive economics, the kind of wit and insight, and an institutional elaboration for young John Kenneth Galbraith to come. When Molly Ivins passed away, the great, witty, incisive columnist for a number of outlets and syndications, again, there was an attempt to extend what she stood for institutionally, and there was no follow-up. And when William Sloane Coffin, that great person who fused the gospel with the peace advocacy and anti-war marches as he led thousands of people from his position at Yale University chaplain, and there was no follow-up. Think of the invigoration of a democratic society that comes from those kinds of follow-ups. We must change the American way of funerals and memorial services. We must do it with our energy while our recollections are fresh and our sensitivities tender. Howard started out, as many of you know, not as an academician. He started out as a manual laborer in New York City. He didn't go to college until he was 27 at NYU as a freshman. He was a bombardier in the U.S. Army. And on one of the runs over Nazi-occupied France, he participated in dropping napalm that burned French civilians. Napalm. That was his greatest teacher. He never forgot that. He put his medals in an envelope when he returned and resolved that he would oppose all wars. He went back to France to visit that small town where the burned victims had survived, those that did survive. The distinguishing feature of Howard Zinn is not that he opposed injustice and he opposed war and oppression. It's that he didn't pick and choose. He didn't oppose one injustice, but for some reason looked the other way at another injustice. And at encomium in the Progressive magazine, Matthew Rothschild, who carried his column in the Progressive every month, had a list of thank yous, of personal thank you, Howard Zinn. And one of the thank yous was this: thank you, Howard Zinn, for being a Jew who dared to criticize Israel's oppression of the Palestinians early on. Early on, he ends. That was a great list of thank yous that Matthew Rothschild delivered. You can see he could have written a book on it, but he wanted to get it out in capsule form. And when you see the range of the thank yous, you can see that Howard was a man for all seasons, that his scope, the breadth, the depth of his concern, and you'll hear about people who are more intimately involved with the people's history of the United States. But you know, every nation that I'm aware of through time, since printing was established by Gutenberg, taught its young the nation's history that was full of omissions, myths, and lies. And the teaching of American history in our country was no exception to that. And that was the authentic revelation of what has to come to be Howard's greatest academic work.